What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my ranking of the NFL pass catching cores, continuing this series from my QB to then running back rankings. And I thought about ranking the top 32 wide receivers, but it's another situation where not every team gets talked about, and I feel bad about leaving some fan bases out. Additionally, some wide receivers are off on their own, so it can create some tough situations. Maybe it bogs them down a little bit in the rankings, or maybe it creates a situation where we think of them even more highly. So instead, I thought about making it a more of a pass-catching core. I'll talk about running backs who were really gifted at catching the football, obviously wide receivers and tight ends in that mix. So that's kind of what my focus was for today's video. If you do want to see me rank all 32 or the top 32 wide receivers in the NFL, let me know down in the comment section. If I have enough people who want to see it, then I will definitely do it. But with all that said, hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel and want more sports content like this, please consider subscribing. And let me hear your rankings down below in the comment section, or tell me where I'm right, where I'm wrong, who's your favorite team, and where should I have them on this list. Let's go ahead and start talking about some of these rankings. At number 32, I'm sorry, Houston Texans fans. I feel like you're always at the bottom of my lists, and that's just kind of a reflection of where this team is at, right? So I like Brandon Cooks, but he's more of a good number 2, really good number 3. Brevin Jordan might be something there as a long-term tight end. That's good. David Johnson, Philip Lindsay, 2 guys who can catch the football pretty well, but it feels like a group of okay guys being asked to be top-end dudes, and because of that, they come in at number 32. And then we get to Detroit at 31, and I like DeAndre Swift, but the problem is he might be their best pass catcher. I mean, him and TJ Hawkinson are legit, they're top 2 proven guys. You know, Tyrell Williams might be in for a bounce-back year. Brashad Perriman always finds ways to have some big games, so I'm not saying that won't happen. I am a fan of Amon-Ra St. Brown, but this is clearly a pass-catching core that is lacking a go-to stud. Maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown's better than we expected. Maybe Williams or Perriman puts together a career year. I'm not thinking that's going to be the case, at least as of right now, so they come in at number 31. And that takes us to the Philadelphia Eagles at number 30. And this is definitely one of those teams where I'll talk about it a few times. They could easily climb up this rankings. One, because they're the third to last team. Really, there's not a whole lot left to go but up. So I think Philadelphia's on the rise, right? Like, I'm a big fan of Devonta Smith. It's just tough to immediately gauge the production of some rookies. I think wide receiver is a position where rookies more often than not can be very effective right away compared to like corners and offensive linemen, where sometimes it takes some years. Wide receivers, they can get right in the mix and make some big impacts. I think that's going to be the case for Devonta Smith, given he's a great route runner and he has awesome hands. And then that allows Jalen Reagor to be moved into a field-stretching slot position, or really just the number 2 target. He's not the guy. And I am a fan of Travis Fulgham. I think he's a pretty solid option. He's just another one of those players that, if he's your number 1, that's kind of a problem. Smith, I think, can be a clear-cut 1. Then you move Reagor and Fulgham into some of these complementary roles. Really like that a lot. I'm waiting to see Dallas Goddard, put it in for a full year. Like last year, I wanted to buy in the hype, and he had some good games, but I need to see it for 17. And if they're going to move on from Ertz, this is the year for Goddard to prove he can be a full-time number 1 tight end. So definitely like that moving forward. Also, the addition of Kenneth Gainwell, really nice pass-catching running back. And Miles Sanders is already a pretty good pass catcher himself. So there's definitely pieces in place for this team to rise up the boards from number 30. On to the Jets at 29. This is a team that is vastly improved in regards to weapons, but don't let that take you too far. Like, don't get carried away. This team is vastly improved in that area, like I said, but they're still not elite, right? And they could get there. You know, if Denzel Mims emerges as a number 1 wide receiver, then this team is going to be moving up the board. And he looked good towards the end of last season. He had some flashes. And I think the addition of Corey Davis is awesome. But I think Davis is a high-end too, like he was in Tennessee. So this team is still looking for that clear-cut number 1 guy. And if it's not Mims, Elijah Moore, especially if they do play him in roles outside of the slot, he has the skill set and the talent and the potential to be that number 1 guy. So I really like that addition. And it's interesting to see, now that you have Moore, what do you do with Jamison Crowder? Though I will say, since they restructured his contract and they made it a little bit more team-friendly, freed up money they didn't need to free up because of how good and how much money they have in regards to cap space. Good move overall, and we're moving towards an NFL where, you know, your base defense is nickel in a lot of ways, and a base offense, instead of being like I form and 2 tight ends, it's 3 wide receivers. So having a good 4th will never be a bad thing. So I do like what the Jets have done. They are lacking in the regards of like an elite tight end, maybe Chris Herndon. We've been talking about it for like 2 years now. Chris Herndon's going to make that leap. Hasn't happened yet. Maybe this is the year. And then also pass-catching running backs, looking to see who takes over and can really emerge in that role. But overall, this is a team that is definitely improving in regard to their pass-catching core. And that takes us to the Indianapolis Colts. And I have had plenty of Colts fans tell me this offseason why I'm crazy. They're going to win more than 6 games. And that's what I had them at in my way too early season predictions video, which I am going to redo, by the way. And I know there's some teams that are low, like the Jets, like the Colts. But man, you look at this pass-catching core, it is not going to be easy for Carson Wentz to win with these guys. Like T.Y. Hilton is a good wide receiver still, but nothing great. And he's not even as good as he once was. Paris Campbell has big play potential, but he's almost never on the field. And I'm as high on Michael Pittman as it gets. I comped him to Juju Smith-Schuster, not only because they both came out of USC, but how they play. They are two very good route runners, know how to find the soft spots in zone, and really live and thrive in and around the first down markers. They know how to move the chains really, really well. But I see Pittman as a high end 2 more than a number 1, so again, this is a team that's just lacking a number 1 stud, and I really wish they could have gotten Kenny Golladay, or if Allen Robinson comes available, they have got to jump all over that. Whatever means necessary, they need to get an elite wide receiver. Really thought they should have been on Julio Jones as well, but as it stands right now, it's an okay group of wide receivers that just no number 1 guy. And they have some good tight ends. Mo Alley Cox is a good success story. I'm from Richmond, Virginia, so seeing a VCU basketball player become a really solid NFL tight end, that's always a W, so I'm a little biased there. I'm pretty high on Mo Alley Cox. I think he can be a great red zone threat as well. And this team does have some good pass catchers in the backfield. Jonathan Taylor has good hands. Marlon Mack is just a really well-rounded guy. And then, of course, Nyheim Hines is the guy you think of. He's an awesome pass-catching running back. So despite coming in at 28, there are players in place, some good pieces to work with for Indianapolis. I just think they're lacking a go-to stud. On to 27, the New England Patriots. And this could be a contentious one depending on how you view how impactful those tight ends were going to be. I think they definitely help, but if you can't win on the outside, that's a problem. This is a game where you need to win with corners and you need to win with wide receivers. And right now, Nelson Aguilar is a good field stretcher. If he can have that Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller type of effect where QBs become more efficient, numbers overall just inflate by them being out there because they can stretch the defense with a deep ball. And they make you respect the deep ball and they open up things in the middle and underneath portions of the field. And if Aguilar can do that, that helps boost up the efficiency of this offense. Kendrick Bourne's an okay guy. He can do a lot of things well, pretty solid separator, but nothing spectacular. And again, this is just one of those teams that I think needs a guy who can take over games, especially considering you play in an awesome division when it comes to high quality competition. The Bills are one of the best teams in the AFC. The Dolphins are an up and coming playoff caliber team as is, and I think they're only getting better. And New England looking to get back into the playoffs after missing last year. I think what gives them the nod over someone like the Jets or the Colts or the 2 tight ends, right? Like Hunter Henry's a really solid player when he's healthy. Jonnu Smith, a lot of the same things you could say there. And they do have James White, who is a good pass catcher. And if they keep Sony Michel, which I don't think they do, but if they do, he's another option out of the backfield as well. So the tight ends give the Pats the edge over the Colts and Jets. They come in at number 27. That takes us to the Las Vegas Raiders at 26. You're going to hear me start sounding like a broken record here. Who's their number 1? I mean, like Henry Ruggs, I guess, on the depth chart is their number 1 guy, but they didn't really use him as a deep play threat. Instead, that role went to Nelson Aguilar. What's that about? And then they didn't really use him underneath. I mean, like you go back to his tape at Alabama, get him on a drag. It's not necessarily a hard route to run, but just get him open. He's faster than most people who will defend him. Get him the ball in his hand. So I'm really intrigued by how the Raiders are going to use him in year 2. And based off his role last year, man, this team is not going to put him in a position for success, which again, I don't know why they gave that role to Aguilar over their first round pick. They made him the first wide receiver off the board. It's just kind of head scratching. Darren Waller's a stud. He's top 2 tight end in my opinion, him and Travis Kelce. And let me know if you want to see me do tight end ranking, because I kind of figured, again, pass catching core kind of encapsulates wide receivers and tight ends. But again, Waller's fantastic. But who else after, Ruggs is a deep play guy who can also do some stuff yak-wise, and Waller, who else does this team really have? Hunter Renfro's fine. He's okay. But there's a lot of question marks there after. Josh Jacobs can catch the football as well. Kenyon Drake, I guess, can. More of a strength for Jacobs than Drake. But I don't know. Waller's just a stud, and he's a mismatch nightmare, so maybe I have the Raiders a little too high, honestly, in retrospect, as I'm talking about it, but they're at 26. I mean, they're already pretty low. On to 25, it's the Baltimore Ravens, and again, this is one of those teams that I foresee I will probably have to move up this ranking because I am a big fan of Rashad Bateman. But the thing with Bateman is throughout the draft process, that is, everyone said, well, we need to see 2019 Rashad Bateman, not 2020 when he got a little light in regards to weight. I think a lot of that's because of COVID. An overall shorter season, he just didn't look as good as he did in 2019. So it's a little bit of a question mark of which Rashad Bateman you're going to get. Sammy Watkins almost never is playing a full season, unfortunately, because he still can play. It's amazing to think he's only 27. He's one of the oldest 27-year-olds I think I've ever seen in football. And then Tylan Wallace is a guy who I really like, but when you look at his route tree, it was go routes, posts / corners, and comeback routes at Oklahoma State, and they stuck him on one side of the field. Baltimore's going to ask him to do something else. So how long does it take for him to acclimate and grow upon that route tree? Mark Andrews is a really solid tight end, had some drop issues last year. I think that's going to be alleviated with him not being the only pass-catching option on this team and not having to be the only player who can make a play in between the numbers. So all that bodes well. I think J.K. Dobbins is a really solid pass catcher in the running back position as well. So there's definitely things in place. And additionally, I should make mention, Hollywood Brown moving from your number 1 to probably your number 3, honestly, and you move him into a slot stretching or field stretching slot position, I think bodes for his play style really well, and it moves this team in a modern direction. But a lot of this comes down to Greg Roman. He did a great job creating an offense for Lamar Jackson. Now he needs to tweak and add some elements and overall make it a little bit more efficient and modernize it just a little bit more to continue to be ahead of the curve in regards to how good this offense can be. So definitely pieces in place. It really comes down to Rashad Bateman and how many games you get out of Sammy Watkins. If Watkins gives you 14 games and he's really solid and Bateman returns to 2019 form, take this team from 25 to probably top 15. On to number 24, it's the New Orleans Saints. And this is one of those cases where Michael Thomas and who else? I mean, like, everybody below them, we've kind of talked about who's their number 1, right? Like in Las Vegas and in Indianapolis, they don't have a stud. New Orleans got a stud. I like Michael Thomas. I think he can be really annoying on Twitter and he can kind of rub people the wrong way, but dude knows how to get open, and he doesn't drop passes either when he's healthy. He is among one of the best wide receivers in the league, and he gets open despite not being a superb athlete, right? Like, he's not somebody who is super fast, doesn't run in the 4.3s, and he has good change of direction, but it's not Allen Robinson type of, like, let me stop on a dime and hit this comeback route, make the catch on the sideline. Thomas just does it with great footwork and knows how to use his hips, lead defenders, knows how to stack corners really well. So I really do like Michael Thomas's game, and now this year he could really solidify himself as a top 5 wide receiver if he adds downfield ability and showcases that for a greater audience. Now that you have Jameis Winston who wants to push the ball down the field, I think it's an opportunity for Michael Thomas really to put on a showcase. But again, after him, who else? Adam Troutman is probably in for a tight end 1 type of season when it comes to fantasy, but it's kind of a thin position as is. So even though he's a tight end 1 in fantasy, what does that really mean, right? Like, there's been years Jared Cook's been tight end 1 conversation, and he's never been somebody who's really impressed me on the field. So this Traquan Smith breakout, we've been waiting a while for that. So I don't know. Alvin Kamara is probably the second best pass catcher on this team, and that's great to have an awesome pass-catching running back, and he is better than most running backs. He, in a lot of ways, could be a slot wide receiver if this team really needed him to be, just like you could say about Christian McCaffrey. Those two guys are just in a league of their own, in my opinion. But it's also just a reflection on how weak this team is in regards to pass catchers outside of Michael Thomas, and then, again, throwing in Kamara in the mix. The Jacksonville Jaguars come in at number 23. I'm interested to see which DJ Chark we see. The one from 2 years ago looked like a breakout candidate, or the one who last year was a little quiet. I think he was a little quiet last year given, the Jags won 1 game and they just weren't very good. Also some injuries in the mix. Additionally, it definitely helps going from Gardner Minshew, who I think is a good backup, but you go from Minshew to a guy who we've been talking about being the number 1 pick for 3 years now. Like, that's going to elevate his play. You add Marvin Jones, year 2 of Laviska Shenault. Hopefully Urban Meyer uses him more than Doug Marrone did, and I want to see Shenault in the backfield as a running back. I want to see him in the slot. I want to see him as an X. This is a guy who could do it all. He was one of my favorite wide receivers. He was my wide receiver 5. I didn't have the channel then, but in that draft, he was wide receiver 5 behind the big 3, Justin Jefferson at 4, which we were all kind of wrong on that. He turned out so far to be the best. And then Shenault was my 5. I'm a huge Laviska Shenault fan. Same thing I loved about Kadarius Toney. You can just use him in so many different ways, and he can just diversify your offense. Put your eggs in a lot of different baskets, right? And that's what you can get with Shenault. So this team lacks a tight end, and James Robinson, not necessarily a great pass catcher. ETN is, though, and they're trying to use him as a wide receiver. So this is a very solid group. And right here in the 23 range, you're going to start seeing some really solid teams who have good pass catchers. They're just not elite. That takes us to the Chicago Bears at number 22 in that same category, right? I think Cole Kmet takes a leap in year 2 at the tight end spot. Montgomery's, he's not really a pass catcher. Really, it's Tariq Cohen. They're looking to fill that role, and Cohen is a good scat back. Allen Robinson is continuous. I'm telling you, he's getting better. He is getting better year by year. And then Darnell Mooney was an awesome addition to that wide receiver room last year. Anthony Miller's been kind of a disappointment, so you add Mooney in last year. Rookie breakout, mid-round guy. That's fantastic. They could use a third, but with Robinson being as good as he is, Mooney's a really good complement. Miller's fine in the slot. Cole Kmet, really do like the pieces around, Andy Dalton and Justin Fields, really for Fields. He's got a competent group around him, and this is kind of what the argument I made for Detroit. Don't take a QB this year, because if you take Fields at 7, he's getting there and having nobody who can help him. Right now, he ends up in Chicago in that same division, but now he has pieces around him, and they'll help him become more effective right away. On to the Atlanta Falcons at 21. Maybe this is still a little high, but even without Julio Jones, I think Calvin Ridley can be a wide receiver 1. He's just so good down the field. And then you add Kyle Pitts in the mix, a guy who can be an inline tight end, play the X, be a slot. He can do so many different things. You've heard it 1,000 times this offseason. Kyle Pitts is already probably the 4th best tight end in football, and that is unbelievable. He's a mismatch nightmare. Hayden Hurst is a solid tight end as well. A little lacking in regards to pass catching options out of the backfield, but overall, when you look at those top end talents, Ridley and Pitts. Also, Russell Gage is a nice tertiary option, as is Hayden Hurst. There's a lot to like when it comes to the pass-catching core in Atlanta, and still bodes really well for Matt Ryan. And this is another one that I think I have a little too low. The Washington football team at 20. Really difficult because Terry McLaurin is one of the most underrated wide receivers in football. He's getting praise, but you look at the production he's had over the last couple of years with guys like Dwayne Haskins and Kyle Allen and Alex Smith throwing him the football. It's unbelievable. I don't know how he's been one of the best wide receivers in football, because with those guys throwing you football, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Additionally, they add Curtis Samuel. My hesitation and what keeps him at 20 is partially due to Samuel, because when Ron Rivera had Samuel at his disposal in Carolina, he didn't really move him around on the field. He didn't use him as a running back. But I'm hoping with the Scott Turner offense, who wants to do things horizontally and is very much looking for how Curtis Samuel was used last year. He's looking for a guy to do the same thing. I think that bodes well, and hopefully Coach Rivera has just seen Matt Rule use Samuel in a very versatile way and wants to add that element to his offense. If so, this team moves up on that contingency alone. Additionally, kind of like we talked about with Tylan Wallace, De'Ami Brown's one of my favorite wide receivers out of this draft class, and he's explosive, big play guy, and he might just have that ability to, when he's on the field, everything opens up, that Will Fuller, Deshaun Jackson effect I talked about earlier. But I want to see him add to that route tree more than just, comebacks and go routes and basically living in a college offense. I want to see him add an NFL route tree, and if he can, I'm telling you, De'Ami Brown's on his way to being a wide receiver 1 in his own respect, and that's a conversation for another day. But if he does that, Curtis Samuel's used in versatile ways, this is probably a top 10 pass core, because you have Terry McLaurin, who's a wide receiver 1, absolute stud. Antonio Gibson, this is the other contingency. I need to see him more in the passing game than J.D. McKissick. It really bewildered me why they continue to use McKissick, because he's a good pass catcher, but Antonio Gibson was literally a wide receiver in college, so let's go ahead and add to the workload. Let's let him thrive in that type of situation. If all three of those things happen, I think this team moves up from 20 into the top 10s, no doubt about it. Also, I'd be remiss not to mention Logan Thomas. What a success story. The former Virginia Tech QB, now one of the best tight ends in football. That's an awesome turnaround for his career. On to the Arizona Cardinals at 19. And before everybody screams at me, DeAndre Hopkins is probably my number 2 wide receiver in the NFL. He's fantastic. Cliff Kingsbury needs to move him around and not just line him up on the left side of the field, but that's an argument for another day. Even in a limited role where Cliff Kingsbury is not using him to the fullest, he was still awesome. He was fantastic last year, and he made maybe the best play of the NFL season, the Hail Murray. He's on the receiving end of that, and it was also like a Joe Jordan brand, basically. It was like a free commercial, just that picture of him making that catch. He's fantastic. AJ Green, I think he's washed. I mean, he just could not get open last year, and he's just not a guy who, if he's not winning 50-50 balls at this point and he can't separate, I don't know how he adds anything to your offense. They need to phase Larry Fitzgerald out of this offense, and instead if they put Rondale Moore into that bubble screen type of role where they were really using Larry Fitzgerald as a extension of the running game, that's going to be a good spot to use Rondale Moore, and I'm really intrigued if they do that. And Rondale Moore himself is a good add, but Andy Isabella hasn't been fully utilized. Christian Kirk hasn't become everything they expected. They don't really use a tight end. Chase Edmonds is a good pass catcher. So there's pieces in place, and DeAndre Hopkins is a stud, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of question marks after Nuke Hopkins about what this team is going to look like and what really lies in regards to talent in that pass-catching group. The LA Chargers coming in at 18. This was one that kind of surprised me when I made this. Keenan Allen's a bona fide stud. I mean, this guy can line up in the slot. He can still play on the outside. One of the best route runners football has to offer. No question. But Mike Williams, a guy who, when he's playing really well, he's a highlight machine. He'll moss people. He's got that big body. He'll win down the field. And he's fun to watch. But between injuries and then also his just own play, sometimes he's not always crisp in and out of his routes. He's just kind of an up and down player. I need to see it for a full 17, and then I'd consider moving the Chargers up. I do like Josh Palmer. He was somebody who didn't have a whole lot of good quarterback play at Tennessee, but kind of reminded me of a baby Jamar Chase. Now at the next level, he's going to have great QB play, so we'll get to see, is it truly that he's a really good player who just was, limited by poor QB play? Or was he just somebody who we kind of gave that label to and maybe boosted up our boards incorrectly? So we'll find that out. But that's a big question mark. I want to see how Palmer's used as that wide receiver 3. As I stated earlier, I am not a big Jared Cook guy. I am amazed he continues to get opportunities and jobs. I think a big part of it is there's 4 legit elite tight ends in football right now. One of them's a rookie, so we're kind of projecting him to be elite. And then after that, it's just a bunch of okay guys. And Cook's fine, I guess. He could be a top 32 tight end, but again, I think that goes to how thin that position is. Austin Eckler, also fantastic pass catcher. Again, we're in this part of the rankings where a lot of good teams have good pass catching cores. They're just not elite. And as it stands right now, you have Keenan Allen, who's fantastic. A couple of question marks, the other guys. Eckler's fantastic out of the backfield, but the running back can only have so much diction and sway to how much you move up this list. On to the Miami Dolphins at 17. Well, Devontae Parker's fantastic as a jump ball, contested catch guy. He's not an elite separator. He's not a great athlete, but he wins with his hands. He wins at the catch point. I'm a big fan of Devontae Parker's game, and he's complemented perfectly with a field stretcher in Will Fuller, who I am telling you, go back and watch the tape last year before his suspension. He is getting better as a route runner. He is learning to be a better wide receiver, and that is scary for the AFC East, but the NFL in general. And then Jalen Waddle was really, he was a top 10 prospect on a lot of people's boards, but I feel like just because of how much love guys like Jamar Chase and Devonta Smith got, that Jalen Waddle just inherently was listed to everybody's 3. And this guy has fantastic downfield speed. I know a lot of his success came in the slot, but that's the role he's going to be playing here in Miami. It's a seamless transition, but he's also fantastic yak-wise. Jamar Chase can do a lot after the catch. So can Devonta Smith, but Jalen Waddle's different than those guys. This guy's twitchy, can stop on a dime, great one-cut type of runner. You get him the ball in space and you just watch. It's fun. It's fun. He's a fun player to watch. So I love the addition of Jalen Waddle. And again, he's not being asked like Devonta Smith to be wide receiver 1. He's coming into a role where it's like, hey, you have a specialized skill set. We're going to carve out a role for you, and we have Will Fuller and Devonta Parker with you. This offense can be firing all cylinders, and with those 3 alone, then you add Mike Gesicki. That is lethal. Gesicki really does do a lot from the slot, so I'd like to see him move more in line if we're going to have Jalen Waddle in the slot. That or go 4 wide and have Waddle and Gesicki on the inside. this team does need a pass catcher out of the backfield. Maybe Savon Ahmed can really do that on a full scale. Really, we only saw him really small sample size end of last year, really filling in for injuries. But maybe he's carved out a bigger role and can be a good pass catcher. We'll see. But there's a lot of really good talent on this Miami team. Some of it comes down to injuries. A lot of those guys have been banged up. Can they play for a full 17? We'll see. But talent-wise, it's hard to argue against Miami. Next is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's a situation where Juju Smith-Schuster might be the biggest name on this list, but to me, he's wide receiver 3. And I'm a Steelers fan, but Deontay Johnson might be the most talented guy on this team. Again, kind of like what we talked about with Jalen Waddle in the sense that he can stretch the field. He is a good athlete, and he actually stacks corners pretty well, knows how to win down the field with his hands. Actually, an underrated part of his game. But then he's also a fantastic guy for the catch. And I know Pittsburgh did a lot of those short passes, and some of it was really catered towards the strengths of Deontay Johnson. He's also somebody, jet sweeps, end arounds. He can be really utilized in that role and have a whole lot of success. And then you get to Chase Claypool, who is Mapletron for a reason, right? Big body, can win at the catch point. Really fun to watch, win down the field. They even used him on some end arounds and jet sweeps. He had like a 3-touchdown game or had a couple of rushing touchdowns in that performance. So, again, a guy who can be used in a lot of different ways. And Johnson and Claypool just complement each other really well. And then if you play Juju in the slot, kind of what we talked about with Michael Pittman, where he wins at the sticks. He can beat man coverage. He's a solid route runner, and he knows how to find the soft spots in the zone. He's not necessarily somebody you're going to ask to, run a 60-yard go. You're drawing it up for him. But he can also run the seam really well, which is a big part of the NFL offense nowadays. So Juju as wide receiver 3 working on the slot, I think is a really solid role. We'll see if he sticks around in Pittsburgh after this upcoming season. Additionally, Eric Ebron, when he's not dropping the football, is still a solid tight end. I'm interested to see how Pat Freiermuth gets in the mix. Tight ends don't typically make big impacts in year 1. And then when it comes out of the backfield, Najee Harris is a pretty solid pass catcher, so that's a nice piece as well. Overall, if you talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, regardless of what you think of their offensive line and how weak it is, and if you think the defense is going to take a step back, almost everybody will come to agreement. There's a lot of talent in that pass catching core, and that's really, I'd argue, the strength of this team. That and then T.J. Watt as an edge rusher, as one of the best 3 defensive players in football, in my opinion. So that's where I stand on the Pittsburgh pass-catching core. Carolina comes in at number 15 to start the top half of this ranking. And I mean, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, and then David Moore is your 3rd wide receiver. What? That is an awesome amount of talent. That's fantastic. Those are the pieces in place that create the argument in a scenario where maybe Sam Darnold turns his career around, which is crazy. Because like just about any other team, you'd say, yeah, he doesn't have a whole lot of weapons. But you have 2 legit number 1s on the outside with Anderson and Moore. They don't have a tight end. They don't really utilize one. But then you have Christian McCaffrey, who is this, safety blanket running back as a pass catcher, can also be used in the slot. And David Moore is a proven NFL pass catcher. So I really like what Carolina's, built on the outside and as a pass catching core overall. And maybe it is enough to resurrect Sam Darnold. There's not a whole lot of teams where you can make that argument for. On to another young, fun team to talk about, the Cincinnati Bengals. And maybe already you could argue the best wide receiver trio in football. I mean, it's definitely like top 10, right? If we're just talking about wide receivers, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd. All young, all getting better, and they're all really, really good. Like we saw T. Higgins last year emerge and prove that he can be a number 1, X-style wide receiver. Jamar Chase is probably the best wide receiver prospect I've ever scouted. Really, I didn't get into scouting until after, Amari Cooper in that draft class. So Chase is the best I've seen. A lot of people have said he's the best either since Cooper or Julio Jones. So that says a lot about how people view Jamar Chase. And then Tyler Boyd might be the best slot wide receiver in the game. So that's a fantastic pass-catching core. And that's part of why I really wanted to see Cincy take Jamar Chase, because then they could get elite in one area, right? You have an elite pass-catching core now. You take Penei Sewell, it helps your offensive line. I'm not saying it would have been a bad pick, but then you're talking about, solid pass-catching core and an improved offensive line versus an offensive line I think is already better, and now an elite pass-catching core. That's what you want, or at least wide receiver core. Drew Sample at tight end holds him back. Joe Mixon's a pretty solid pass-catching option, but, how much do they want to use him in that role given his health? That could be a factor. And then Chris Evans is a rookie. I do think he fits that Gio Bernard role really well, but that's me projecting him in that role. I haven't seen it yet. So awesome trio wide receivers. A couple of question marks after that, though. Next up is the Green Bay Packers, and obviously Davante Adams, one of the best doing it right now in the game. I'd argue the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. His ability to get off the line and his route running just makes DBs look ridiculous. You watch him and you watch DBs opposite him, he's got him in another area code. It is unbelievable how much separation he created for himself. And Allen Lazard has really kind of grown on me. He's a pretty solid player. I won't say okay, he's pretty solid. An MVS, when he holds onto the football, can be a good field stretcher. So overall, it's not a terrible pass catching core, but it's definitely one guy carrying the load, right? But Davante Adams is so good that opposing defenses will know he's getting the football in the red zone, and he still wins because he's that good of a separator and he has that good of hands, which is just unbelievable. Robert Tonyan has emerged as a, not necessarily an elite tight end, but man, he gets it done in the red zone, and he does like 3 routes over his season. You look at the PFF route tree and like where he catches the football. They don't ask him to do a whole lot, but he's pretty good at the things they do ask him to do, and he is effective at finding the end zone. Aaron Jones, fantastic pass catcher. Do lose Jamal Williams, but Aaron Jones is good enough to, be that number 1 pass catching guy out of the backfield. So overall, ton of talent in Green Bay, but it's really headlined by Davante Adams, Aaron Jones, if you want to count a running back in that mix, and then, good complementary pieces, good enough complementary pieces, I really should say. San Francisco 49ers come in at number 12, and for them, I think they can definitely be higher than 12. So 49ers fans, before you start commenting some hate my direction, I just need to see it all come together, right? Last year, we saw a ton of injuries between, Samuel, Ayuk, and Kittle. I want to see them all on the field at the same time. If it's as good as I expect it to be, they're better than 12. But because I haven't really seen it all together at once, I'm kind of projecting, but also playing it safe and kind of in no man's land, you could say, at 12. I think there's enough talent here for this to be easily top 10, top 8 pass catching core. Because Kittle went on the field, top 3 tight end in football, at least top 4. We'll see how Pitts, fits into that top group. But 3 are top 4 tight end in football. Raheem Mostert can catch the football really well out of the backfield. That's always something that Kyle Shanahan knows how to utilize, those running backs in the passing game. Kyle Juszczyk is not just your normal fullback. He's basically like a athletic, he's a tight end that plays fullback. He's athletic enough to be involved in the passing game. It's kind of a hard thing to explain because he's just such a interesting case study for that position, and Kyle Shanahan makes the most of his talent. And then Samuel and Ayuk are very similar, but also so talented, and I really appreciate Kyle Shanahan embracing this positionless wide receiver type of situation in that room, right? He's not saying, I need an X, I need a slot, I need a Y, I need a field stretcher. He's just saying, that dude can play football and he can help me move the ball. I want Deebo Samuel, or I'm going to trade up and get Brandon Ayuk because he can help me get first downs and touchdowns. And I really appreciate that, and Kyle Shanahan's a good enough play caller where you don't need somebody to be an X, you don't need a field stretcher, you don't need somebody to be designated slot. He's just going to get people open, and there's a lot of talent there in that room. So I do like San Francisco. I just want to see all those guys on the field at once. Number 11, Buffalo Bills. I have them pretty low compared to someone like PFF, so that kind of was interesting for me because I always try to gauge and see where other people have these teams ranking in regards to pass catchers. Stephon Diggs is a stud. I do worry about John Brown being gone, though I do think Emmanuel Sanders and Gabriel Davis can help make up the production you'll lose with John Brown down the field. Additionally, I think Emmanuel Sanders is a better intermediary option, someone 10 to 19 yards over the middle of the field. I think Sanders does that better than John Brown. Really, this team could be higher, but Dawson Knox has not been what I thought he'd be as a tight end, which is definitely a disappointment. And Devin Singletary is an okay guy catching the football, and that's about all his role can be at this point. He's been a big disappointment. I was pretty high on him coming out of FAU, and it just hasn't come together. Now I'm kind of high on Zach Moss. I think he could be a good sleeper in fantasy. So I'm waiting for somebody in that backfield to really prove it. But Singletary can catch the football. Knox has been a disappointment. If they add Zach Ertz, someone who's just like a good, solid tight end, be a good red zone option, they're probably up into the top 10. But Diggs is a stud. A couple of question marks after that. But I also trust Brian Daboll to create an efficient offense as he did last year and really over his entire tenure in Buffalo. On to the top 10, the New York Giants. Man, what an offseason, right? fantastic job bringing in Kenny Golladay, and you spent a first-round pick on Kadarius Toney after moving down. And maybe you have a knock on, the Toney pick, but it comes after you move down. The process is sound, so even if you're not crazy about them going wide receiver, felt like they did want Devonta Smith, so when he's off the board, they found a guy who can do similar things, shifty, good route runner, creates big plays, can work in the slot. I think that's kind of what they were looking for, and they got the additional assets, as I mentioned. And Kenny Golladay, 4-year contract, he's only getting better. If he's on the field, he's continued to get better. Remember, he was drafted as a project, and he's still a little bit of a work in progress, but he has emerged as one of the best wide receivers in football, at least in my opinion. And then you have Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, two solid guys. Slayton more as your downfield guy. Sterling Shepard is your route runner, guy who can work in the slot. So again, this is a position where if you can go 4 deep, that's a good sign. And if Sterling Shepard, in my opinion, probably right now the 4th most talented guy, maybe because Tony's a rookie, he's that wide receiver 4. But it comes down to Jason Garrett making sure all these guys see the field. Also, Evan Ingram drops a lot of passes, but man, he's such a good athlete. Like, you have to like what he could be at the tight end spot. And Kyle Rudolph's still one of the most effective red zone threats in the NFL, which is unbelievable, but he still gets the job done. And Saquon Barkley is a plus level pass catcher out of the backfield. So now we're in the spot where I know they come in at 10, but this is an elite pass catching core. Like, this is what you want around a guy who you're thinking in year 3 can take that leap, or if he doesn't, you find out that he's not your guy. Like, this is what you want around him. At number 9, the Seattle Seahawks. Man, that top 2 tandem of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, one of the best duos in football. Like, Metcalf's this physical specimen, can be so effective in a lot of different ways, really does a great job down the field. And then Tyler Lockett makes some of the craziest catches you'll ever see. You could just YouTube Tyler Lockett ridiculous catch, and you see 5 or 6 random ones come up, and you're just like, what? Why is this the guy making these plays? Like, he is not DeAndre Hopkins, and he's not DK Metcalf, and he's not Julio Jones. He's just not who comes to mind making those ridiculous plays. But him and Russ, they got the chemistry down, and he just makes insane play after insane play. He's one of my most underrated players in the NFL. I love watching Tyler Lockett. You add Dwayne Eskridge into the mix, and Shane Waldron's a guy who wants to move the ball horizontally left to right. And I think Eskridge could really be a big part of what Waldron wants in regards to that left to right movement. And I think he's a good player to play in the slot. Chris Carson, not a whole lot there as a pass catcher, but he's okay. They also signed Gerald Everett to be their starting tight end, so they get a good athletic tight end, something they haven't really had for Russ. So that's an additional weapon. And again, we're starting to get into elite territory here, and I really do like what Seattle has put around Russell Wilson. And he got into a hot start last year. If he can do it for a full 17, he's probably a guy who's top 3 MVP voting, maybe even comes away with the award. On to the Cleveland Browns. This was a tough one to rank. I initially had him higher, but OBJ has to be healthy. And I'm not somebody who thinks that OBJ is like a cancer to this offense. I think last year just took some time under a first-time head coach and Kevin Stefanski implementing his offense for it to all get rolling. I think adding OBJ only makes this team better. And if they have him, they have a clear number 1. Because Jarvis Landry's good, but when you play a lot from the slot, I have a hard time thinking you can be that number 1 guy. Additionally, he's not a stellar athlete, but he just is a good route runner, really good hands, and he's solid after the catch. He just wins in a different way. And then Donovan Peoples-Jones had some flashes. He's really kind of that MVS mold where off of play action, he could be a guy down the field to make a big play. And that serves him well. Rashad Higgins also filled in admirably, a couple times last year, especially after the OBJ injury. Higgins really got a bigger role, and he was serviceable. He did his job. This team really almost made the argument to get higher off of, one, how they use their tight ends, and then the talent in that tight end room. Like, Harrison Bryant is your 3rd? You're kidding me. That's ridiculous. He's a starting tight end for a handful of teams. David Njoku starts for probably half the teams in the NFL. Again, we're talking about such a scarce position. It feels like the Browns are hogging all the talent in that position. And then Austin Hooper is a top-end tight end in football. He is one of those really good players at the position, and he's great in the red zone. Overall, that tight end room is kind of crazy. Kareem Hunt's an awesome pass catcher. Nick Chubb can be used in that role. You add Demetric Felton in this draft. Mitchell Schwartz as well, 2 speedy guys. And then Felton can be used as a running back and a slot wide receiver. So adding some diversity in regards to talent. Really like where this, pass catching core is at for Baker Mayfield. And I think this is a year where I think they already have the, understanding that they want to sign Mayfield to a long-term extension, but they're going to put it on his plate this year. They want him throwing the football a lot, which is gonna be a little worrisome for a Browns fan because they're great when they set up the run with Chubb and Hunt and then run play action off of it. So hopefully they still run through that, but I think they want to see a lot from Mayfield just to make sure they feel safe giving him that big contract. And if OBJ's healthy, this is one of the best pass catching cores to be throwing the football to. Next up, we got the Los Angeles Rams, and you can tell after adding Matt Stafford, they made a point to go out there and get as many weapons as possible, and they already had a really good duo in Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I mean, that's as good of a 1-2 punch, and it's a really underrated tandem as well. Then you go out there and sign Deshaun Jackson, who, when he is healthy, obviously that's a huge asterisk we're leaning on, but when he is healthy, he is still very efficient, and he boosts up QB efficiency numbers and passing yard numbers because he still has the downfield speed you have to respect. He'll make a play down the field, but he also just takes the top off the defense and opens up things over the middle of the field and underneath. So he's just a big element. If he's healthy, he's a big boost. And even if he's not healthy, you kind of have that with Tutu Atwell. A little bit smaller, but he still has that insane downfield speed, and he's got a little bit more yak ability, right? You just get him on a bubble screen or, a handoff, jet sweep, something of that nature. And Tutu Atwell can make some big plays. I just worry about his size. Can he stay healthy? So, time will tell the story there. But, you already have a couple of good wide receivers. You add 2 more into the mix. I think Van Jefferson is due for a big breakout year. I've actually been looking back at my analytics, and my top 10 breakout candidates video is starting to do really, really well. People are looking forward to this upcoming season, and Van Jefferson was on that. So definitely go check out that vid if you haven't. I'll probably add some more names to that list because there's some more names I'm excited to see for this upcoming season. Also, you hold on to Tyler Higbee, who's a pretty solid tight end. He's a little up and down, but he gets the job done considering how many other weapons they have. And then Cam Akers, man, I think he's a stud in the making. Loved his vision last year and his big playability, and he can catch the football at a pretty high level. So I really do love the weapons they have around Matt Stafford, and that's why they come in so high on this ranking. And that leads us into the Minnesota Vikings, another team that just has a complete, well-rounded offense, maybe with one area lacking behind, but I think that takes a leap forward this year. We'll talk about it now. Obviously, a fantastic duo with Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, as mentioned a little earlier, was my wide receiver 4 in that 2019 wide receiver class. But he proved to be the most efficient, effective, at least immediately, of that wide receiver group. We'll see if Jerry Jeudy, bounces back, emerges as the top guy. CeeDee Lamb could certainly do that in an explosive offense in Dallas, but as it stands right now, Justin Jefferson's been the best. And, you're breaking records held by Randy Moss. You're doing something pretty good. So you have him opposite of Adam Thielen. Fantastic. They primarily only use 2 wide receivers. So, Chad Beebe as your wide receiver 3 is not ideal. They could get better there, but they don't necessarily use a whole lot of 3 wide receiver sets. One of the lowest 3 wide receiver set percentages in the NFL. Irv Smith, that tight end position might be the one spot you're looking at. It's a little weak, especially after you lose Kyle Rudolph, who, like I said earlier, is fantastic in the red zone. But I think Irv Smith, if he's healthy, takes that leap forward. He's just a better athlete. He's more of what you want in a modern tight end. We just haven't seen it yet. But I am projecting that he takes that leap forward. But even if he doesn't, you have the 2 wide receivers on the outside, and you have Dalvin Cook, who's not only one of the best running backs in football, but he's also a pretty solid pass catcher. And honestly, a lot of the same can be said about Alexander Madison. Underrated guy. He's a backup behind one of the best running backs in football. Be interesting to see when he hits the open market, what kind of a contract does Madison try to command, and what type of role does he eventually earn on another team if he does leave Minnesota. But that aside, Cook's fantastic. I'm excited to see Irv Smith. Thielen and Jefferson are one of, maybe even the best wide receiver duo in football. In some people's opinion, they probably are number 1. It's definitely up there as one of the best. Next up, we get to the Denver Broncos. And this is crazy to think. Denver comes in at number 5? Are you kidding me? But Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Cortland Sutton's coming back. That's an awesome wide receiver room. Also, Tim Patrick, Deshaun Hamilton. There's dudes ready to be making plays 1 through 5 in that wide receiver room. Noah Fant, Albert Okwuegbunam, awesome tight end tandem. Then you look at the running backs. I love Javonte Williams. May not be a great pass catcher, but he can provide you some help there. Melvin Gordon has, been an efficient enough pass catcher. Mike Boone also coming from Minnesota. Always really talented running backs come from, that Vikings organization. So they have weapons out of the backfield. Fantastic group of wide receivers. 2 awesome tight ends who just really, epitomize what modern tight ends should look like. You're not really worried about route running. It's just how athletic you are. And because of that, you can get open on crossing routes, drags, those vertical seams. And that's what Noah Fant and Albert O can do for you. They are just lacking a QB, and that's why everybody's saying they got to go get Rodgers, because if you could add a top 10 or top tier quarterback, obviously Rodgers top 3. If you saw my QB rankings, you'd know that. But you add an elite QB to that many weapons, that is a insane offense. So weapons aren't the problem in the Mile High City. That comes down to QB play. But it's insane to talk about a team that could very well go below 500 with whether it's Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, be top 5 in regards to pass catching cores. Next up, the Tennessee Titans, and they pole vault towards the top of this list after acquiring Julio Jones. If I did this before the Julio trade, they're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like Atlanta at 21, Chicago 22, because they have that one guy in A.J. Brown who's like top 10 wide receiver, one of the best, up and coming, continuously getting better. He's great. But then after that, Josh Reynolds, he's been given a lot of chances, but he remains to be somebody who really impresses despite the opportunities he's given. And then not a whole lot else. I mean, there's legitimately jokes on Twitter arguing that if A.J. Brown were to get hurt, Ryan Tannehill has a pathway to be like one of the top 2 or 3 wide receivers on this team, which is just crazy. For those who don't know, Tannehill played wide receiver originally at Texas A&M. But with the addition of Julio Jones, you have 2 dudes. You got like 2 of the top 5 to 6 wide receivers in football on your team. And I think they still need to acquire a tight end. I really like the idea of them signing Trey Burton, who's still out there. He's a really solid run blocker, and he's just a good enough tight end. He's filled that role as like a tertiary option really, really well. He's good in the red zone. I think he's the guy that should target. Plus, you don't have to give up draft capital if you were to go after someone like Zach Ertz. So I like the idea of signing Burton a lot. But still, as it stands now, there's a lot of people who are excited about Anthony Firkser. Even when Jonnu Smith missed games last year, Firkser didn't have that big of a role, but I could see the potential and I can understand the hype. And if he can be, adequate and a good enough replacement to Jonnu Smith, 2 great pass catchers on the outside, and Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, that might be the most talented wide receiver duo in the NFL. Derrick Henry isn't anything special as a pass catcher, but it's one of those things where it's like if you get him on a screen, he gets that, head start. He's not easy to bring down, obviously. So overall, awesome offensive, weapons around Ryan Tannehill, and that's why you see a lot of people buying into him as like a dark horse MVP. And I could see this team going 13-4, maybe stealing the number 1 seed out of the AFC from the hands of Kansas City. We're stretching here, but there is a pathway for Tannehill to win that award, and a big part of it is because of the amount of talent around him. Next up, the Dallas Cowboys coming in at number 3. No surprise here. I mean, this is probably the best wide receiver trio in the NFL, right? I mean, Amari Cooper's a certified number 1. Michael Gallup's a number 1 on a lot of teams. And then CeeDee Lamb is a number 1 as of right now for a handful of teams. I think he's only going to keep getting better. Dalton Schultz, Blake Jarwin, I'm interested to see what they do with that tight end position. Both of them have had moments, but now I want to see which one earns it over a bigger sample size. And then Zeke Elliott, there's a lot of talk about what his contract does to that team and how it kind of hamstrings them against the cap and how it's kind of led to a depreciation of talent on that defensive side. But, I still think he's an okay player. I think he's a solid. I have him at, top 10 running back in the NFL. I could definitely be persuaded otherwise depending on how this upcoming season plays out. But he can catch the football. Tony Pollard is actually a legitimately really good pass catcher. Maybe Pollard is somebody that should get more reps for this team. And if he does, that only solidifies my argument that much more that they're a top 3 offensive pass catching core. So no arguments here. I mean, this top 3 is pretty consensus, right? Like you can see on your screen, Bucs are 1, Chiefs 2, Cowboys 3. Like that's just about across the board what everybody else has. Moving to the Chiefs at 2. They're in a little bit of a different spot. And you can make an argument the Cowboys should be ahead of them, just given they have more options. I give the Chiefs the nod because of the fact that Tyreek Hill's better than any wide receiver the Cowboys have, at least as of right now. I'm not saying CeeDee Lamb can't become a top 3 wide receiver, but I'd probably have Tyreek Hill as my wide receiver 3 if I do that wide receiver rankings. And then Travis Kelce is probably the best tight end in football right now, right there with Darren Waller and a healthy George Kittle. Those guys are studs. They're dudes. Demarcus Robinson coming back, he's kind of in that Josh Reynolds category where he's been given chances but hasn't done anything to really wow you with them. We'll see if McCole Hardman, breaks out. You got to keep in mind, this guy was a college cornerback. It takes some time, and his ability to be a big play downfield threat might be enough, right? Like, the Packers ask MVS to really do one thing, and it's go make a 50-yard catch. Just, please God, catch the football when we throw it your way. And I feel like that's going to be the role for McCole Hardman. Like, hey, when we toss it your way, make sure you catch it. Because if Patrick is throwing it to you, he's going to put it on the money. Make the big play. That's all we're really asking. We have Tyreek. We have Travis Kelce. McCole just be the big play guy in addition to those two. Not that those two don't make enough big plays. They're obviously big play threats themselves. Where there might be some cause for concern is Tampa Bay really kind of solve the puzzle in the Super Bowl. You take away one of those two options, and it has to be Tyreek Hill. Like, you let Kelce get 10 catches. He'll find the end zone more than likely, and he'll probably get up and over 100 yards. But it's one of those things where if Travis Kelce has 10 catches, it's probably like 150 yards, touchdown or two. But if Tyreek Hill has 10 catches, you have that situation where these two teams faced in the regular season where he's going for nearly 300 yards. He's getting 3 tutties just based off of who they are and the type of player that they are and the plays that they produce. So because of that, taking away Tyreek Hill, that led to a lot of issues on top of, bad offensive line in Kansas City. Maybe if tackles were better, it plays more in favor of the Chiefs. But I'm interested to see how defenses try to take away Tyreek Hill. And when it is, who else can make a play? Travis Kelce's a stud. And I like some of the other guys. Cornell Powell, someone who's getting a lot of hype for a 5th-round rookie. But, that remains to be seen. But regardless, they come in at number 2 because they have a great pair of, dudes, just studs, and Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. And if we're talking wide receiver and tight ends included, that might be the most talented duo, them or A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. Take your pick. And then number 1, Tampa Bay. Awesome wide receiver trio. I know I said the Cowboys might have one, but it's them or the Bucs. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown. They also draft Jalen Darden. They have Tyler Johnson. They have Scotty Miller. They almost have too many wide receivers. And then, awesome tight end room. Rob Gronkowski is still one of the best doing it. O.J. Howard needs to be, sent somewhere else so he can finally see the field and be who he was, expected to be coming out of college. Cameron Brate is still effective in the red zone. They add Giovanni Bernard. So the one weakness they really had was they didn't have a pass-catching running back because Ronald Jones is not one of those. And Fournette, I guess can, but that's not his strength either. So you add Giovanni Bernard and okay, now we have a pass-catching running back. There's literally no weakness in any of those categories now when it comes to the pass-catching core. So without a doubt, Tampa Bay comes in at number 1. But that's going to do it for this one. Comment down below your pass-catching rankings of these cores. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who's your favorite team? Why do I have them too low? Love to hear your argument. I respond to every comment, so let's have that discussion. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel and want more sports content like this, please consider subscribing. That's all I got for you. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.